Hi everyone, welcome. Today I will present the findings of the research project Queer Interventions on Prison Self-Harm. This research is funded by the European Commission through the Horizon programme and has been conducted with the support of my host institution here in the UK, the University of Warwick. I am Elena Vasiliou, the main researcher behind this study. I am a psychologist and queer scholar from the south of Europe. And today, with my guest Warren, we'll take you through some of the findings and lived experience that shape this work. Welcome, Warren. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name's Warren. I'm a volunteer for a company called SUIT, which is a service user involvement team.
Great. Thank you so much for being here and also for your support throughout the research. I also want to thank the team at SUIT, Service User Involvement Team in Wolverhampton, especially Christian Jenkins for her work and you for the work that you're doing there. Now, this theme is personal for me for two reasons. First, I've experienced the loss of incarcerated students to suicide and self-destruction. And second, I'm someone who has struggled with self-destruction desires and tendencies myself, and researching this topic over the last few years have been emotionally difficult. I will start with something that came up a lot in this research, Warren, and then I will call you in to say your experience.
Yeah.
So a lot of the participants said that the way in prison that the institutions respond to distress often makes things worse. So someone says that they are suicidal, and instead of support, they are watched or 24/7 or punished. One person said, for example, "Of course I self-harm. Look where I have just ended up." So the environment punishes vulnerability, and even asking for help can feel dangerous. So Warren, I want you to share a bit about yourself, and if, like Gio, the participant, you had already been self-destructive before ending up in prison.
Yeah, definitely. Right, I'm 56 years old. My criminal career started at the age of 12, 13. I was self-destructing then, but I didn't realise. At the age of 9, I was sexually abused, and also 11. And I changed completely as a character. I self-destructed from the second it happened at 9-year-old, but I just didn't understand. I didn't understand. Anybody that got close to me, I'd push them away, and I was just seen as being unruly, This is a school system now. This is a parental system. Both my parents were army people, and they were very strict with authority and punishment, punitive punishment. Personally, everything I did was monitored, and I just started kicking against society because of what had happened to me. I couldn't voice it. I couldn't put out what had happened to me. So I started to get involved with crime and stuff like that, and the sort of people I hung around with, I felt could protect me. They were older, but they were criminals, and I was manipulated and used at the start. But I started earning good money, what I considered good money. But then I found alcohol and drink. This was my first time of recognising self-destruction. And when I drank, I didn't drink to be merry or anything like that. I drank to get obliterated. That was my goal. When I found drugs, I took drugs to become unconscious. But I was too young to understand self-destruction. I just thought it was what people like me did. I was trying to impress on whatnot. And I was constantly like that. Then I started getting in trouble with the police, which is a form of self-destruction, actually. But I didn't realise it at the time, But I liked the kudos it gave me. So the thing that was hurting me, I actually thought was giving me strength and power. Right?
Great. That's exactly the point. So it was a kind of coping in those conditions.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
And I think this is something that I would like to point out in this research, that this kind of coping is so misunderstood by psychologists and the general public. And people struggle to understand the rationale of those who are self-destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of our conversation today is to give us a little bit of an insight into that way of thinking and coping.
Yeah. Oh, I remember having a conversation with you, and we never carried it on. But I know I said something that really, I saw your ears prick up. And it was that some people take drugs to hide pain or to lose themselves. I used to do that, but I also used to take drugs to empower myself. Mm-hmm. You know, when I would take certain drugs, it would take away all my inhibitions, and I could then go and commit the sort of crime that I wouldn't normally let myself do. You know, and that's self-destructing in itself. And then I'd go and commit that crime and go and get more drugs to get rid of the feeling that I've given myself, to go and get them.
Yeah.
That sounds crazy, but I would get high to do something, and then I would get high because I hated what I'd become. Now that is self-destruction personified. It's like I didn't understand it because I was just getting high.
Yeah.
And then it crosses over into becoming an addict.
Yeah.
And you don't understand you're an addict for quite a long time. You know, you convince yourself that you're loving it. But I would start to make half decent money, and then I'd blow the lot. I would just have a phase where everything would be going great for me, and I would just blow the lot. I'd go to prison. In prison, I'd get clean. Then I'd come out, and I'd do it all again.
Yeah, a circle.
Yeah, it was just, and that's what it was. Yeah. Prison became normal to me.
Yeah.
You know, I had no fear for prison. I got on with people in prison. It was just an occupational hazard.
Yeah.
You know, I was a career criminal, and it's you go to prison, you get clean, you come out, you do what you're doing until you go to prison again. And that became my life cycle for a long time.
And also you have a place in prison, right? You have a position in some ways.
Well, the Midlands is a small circuit in the prisons, and once you start going to the same prisons time and time again, you get to know people. They get to know you. And as long as you keep your head down and do certain things, you can have an amiable time in there.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as what some people think, and for some, it's worse than you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
You know, and when you mentioned at the start about destruction and your mere surroundings can bring you to a level that's terrifying. I was lucky that I never really experienced that because I went at a young age, I adapted. I was a criminal from a young age, so I was ready for what was coming. But I have sat in cells with people who I could see were absolutely terrified, you know, and I've had next door neighbours who've committed suicide, and I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
I've warned officers that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and going back to what you just said, it's like, can you keep an eye on him? They'd ask me could I keep an eye on him. Well, hold on a minute. We're in a prison. I'm closed behind a door. I see him for an hour a day, and then I see him for 15 minutes when I go and get my meal. How can I keep an eye on him? You know, this system's asking me. It's passing on its duty of care.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things I could say about that really, now I'm older, and I haven't been to prison for quite a long time, that I realise the whole system is set up to fail. It's not set there to work.
And is set up to fail you.
Yeah.
The person who is in, the people who are in.
Right.
So the system is failing, but some people, they are actually drawing.
The whole idea of prison is to rehabilitate. Well, anybody that's listening to this, just ask me where the rehabilitation comes from. If you put someone behind a door for 23 hours a day, how are they being rehabilitated? You're treating them like an animal. And some people will say, well, that's how they should be treated. But the trouble is, these people are going to come back out into society. And they have been created by what you want. What you wanted was for them to be locked up. But now they're back out there in the worse than the person that came in. Some people go in and they have other problems. They have other issues. They have mental issues and stuff like that. And they don't just try and commit suicide once or twice. They'll be doing it all the time, and they put on a 15-minute watch or stuff like that, and it fails again. The officers who are there to look after them have very basic training, and I'm not blaming them.
Yeah.
But they have very basic training. They're not psychologists, psychoanalyzing people or anything like that. They're Joe Bloggs, who's been in the army or something like that, who's come out and he's now a prison officer.
Yeah.
He hasn't got the mental capability to be helping these people. And their voyage of self-destruction, for me, is terrifying. Because I like to consider myself well-balanced these days. But some of the people that I've sat down with, I could see the pain that they were in.
Yeah.
From second one, I could see it. So if I could see it, why can't you, the paid professional, see it? And why can't you give them the help that they deserve or require, whatever you want to see it as?
Thank you so much, Warren. That's so important to hear. So one of the biggest things that I learned while doing this research is that pain have very different meanings, as you said, and that in some ways, self-inflicted pain, so drugs, self-destruction, self-harm, all these acts, it's a way to get some kind of control back. You touched a little bit earlier on that by saying that for you, drugs was something like a numbing effect in order to be able to act. And I will just want you to talk a little bit more about that, because it seems to me that self-inflicted pain, it's very important there. It's a reaction to the pain that the system imposes on you. So there is a connection there.
Yeah, well, because of what happened to me, I never understood at the time. And it takes a while. You know, you inflict all different sorts of pain on yourself. It takes a while before you find the one that suits you. For some people, it's cutting. For some people, it's doing drugs. For some people, it's alcohol. For some people, it's violence. You know, it takes a time for that trauma to find you, and you become comfortable with the trauma. For me, I say unlucky enough. It just so happens it was drugs and drink, and I could just completely become numb.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that's what I was doing. I thought I was getting high, but I wasn't. I was becoming numb. I hated what happened to me. I hated the way people laughed at me because of what happened to me. But you couldn't stop me getting high. That was mine. I gave birth to my addiction. I know this sounds really ridiculous, but I gave birth to it and I nurtured it, and it was mine. I would become somewhat offended when people criticised my addiction, because that was mine.
Yeah.
I didn't realise it at the time, but that was something that I was in total control of, and I realise now as an older man that I've sought control for the rest of my life. Do you know what I mean? And then when I've had it, I've given it up because I didn't think I deserved it.
Yeah, of course.
Do you know, and it took me back to that 9-year-old boy.
Of course.
You know, and I can say this now as a grown-up, but I just didn't understand why every time I thought I'd reached where I wanted to be, as soon as I took my foot off the gas, I just relapsed and went straight back to square one. My life's been like a game of snakes and ladders.
Yeah.
I've always hit 99 and then gone down that ladder back to number 2, down that snake to number 2. Pain, I never ever saw it as pain to start off with.
Yeah.
Do you know, it was just comfort.
Yeah.
It was where I was. Yet the funniest thing is, whenever I've gone to prison, I haven't done drugs.
Yeah, you said that earlier, that you went to prison and then you have been clean and then went out and then start again. So, I heard that story many times.
Yeah.
It's like an opportunity to rehab.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because in prison, I couldn't get the drugs that I wanted to the amount that I wanted, so I wasn't going to go there. When I'm out here, when it runs out, I go and commit crime and I get more.
Yeah.
In prison, I'm behind a door. Once it's gone, it's gone. So therefore, I wasn't in control of that habit, so I wouldn't entertain it.
Yeah.
I only know that now. I didn't entertain it because I couldn't control it. Out here, I could control it.
Yeah. So it was a means of control again.
Again, yeah. I've always needed to be in control. People that will know me will tell you that I'm forthright. I'm very quick to step in. I'm always the first to do something. It's my way of being in charge, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, this was created many, many years ago. I have to be the first one in, because that way I know I'm looking after myself. I'm being protected.
Yeah, but I think back then that was the only way of being in control. That's the change with today, right? Today you have self-control through other means, but back then you didn't have any other way of being in control, especially after the experience that you had with like trauma and the fact that you found comfort in gangs. And so it seems to me that it's much more complicated than just want to be in control. It's being in control the moment that everything else has been taken out of you.
But you know, the worst thing about all of this, when I say it's me being in control, the God's honest truth is I was never in control.
Yeah.
I was being controlled by my id. You know, what's going on in the back here was what was controlling me.
Yeah.
But I thought I was in control, not realising that I was being manipulated by something that I had no idea was pulling my strings the way it was. And when I self-sabotaged, it was almost like I felt that I didn't deserve to be where I was getting. You know, popularity comes and you start enjoying it. But at some point, I used to sit there and get imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Really bad, and think, I don't deserve this. And then I'd find myself back in a local crack house, smoking crack with people that I would never normally associate with, but feeling very comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
Feeling like this is where I belonged.
Yeah.
I know now, no, I didn't belong there. I should never have been there. But at the time, it served a purpose.
Yeah.
It made me feel back in control.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was in a place where I could be dishing out the drugs. I could be doing this, I could be that. And I just felt comfortable.
And you had a position there. You enjoy a position.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it was if I went into a place like that, the odds were I had quite a bit of money on me. It wasn't always like that, don't get me wrong, but I had quite a bit of money on me, and people would be waiting on me to give them.
Yeah.
So therefore I'm in control. I'd be buying it off the dealer in the house, but then dishing it out. And this is really weird what I'm going to say now. When it had all gone, I would then sit there and watch people pull money out who I'd been feeding all night, who would give me next to nothing. And I would never challenge them on it. I would absolutely hate myself for giving them in the first place. Now, if that's not self-destruction, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, but it's really like giving us a little bit of an idea, of an insight of how complicated is self-destruction and how it's related with many things like trauma, pain, control, a vicious circle, self-sabotage. This is very interesting, like how very important to understand how we can be caught in that trap of self-sabotaging constantly.
Well, from the second you walk into a prison, there's a feeling. You can walk into certain prisons and know that you're in a serious place. There's a feeling.
Yeah.
It's never silent. There's a smell. There's everything about it. And
noise.
Your mentality. Noise. Wow, don't start me on noise. Noise is such an important thing. The sound of keys to me doesn't mean the sound of keys, possibly the same as the sound of keys to you. If I'm in a cell and I know I'm in the end cell and I hear 6 or 7 pairs of boots come marching down this landing, the closer they get to me, the more likely it is that they're coming into my cell. So I'm getting myself ready for that door coming open now, whatever it is, whatever they're after. And that's a noise that to the I won't say untrained, but somebody who's never been through it, they'd never understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
On a Saturday, I might be expecting a visit. So I hear the keys coming down the landing and I'm getting excited thinking they're coming to my cell. Then I hear them go into the cell 2 doors away. And it breaks my heart because my visit hasn't come that day.
Yeah.
You know? And then there's the time when they do come and they put the key in the door. And that's the first time you're just relieved, but you wait for them to say your visit's here first. And then you're happy. See, these are so many things. There's never silence in prison because there's so much electricity and so many lighting systems. There's always a hum.
Yeah.
There's always someone walking. There's always the sound of keys or the sound of people screaming or shouting, because mental health now in prison, there's so much of it. There's so much of it, people with dual diagnosis and stuff like that. And there's never a silence. And the first time you think you get a bit of silence, you hear yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the most terrifying noise of the lot.
That's the worst.
Yeah, that's the most terrifying, because then you've got your thoughts. Then you're locked into your own thoughts and you start analysing and looking at yourself.
And feeling guilty, and then again, self-punishment comes, or like ideas of self-punishment.
I don't know about guilt, but self-hate.
Self-hate, yeah.
Yeah, self-hate, because you become immune to guilt for a while.
Yeah.
Or I did. You become immune. You can't do the stuff you do and have a feeling of guilt, because then you would never be able to do it.
Of course,
but you can loathe yourself.
Yeah.
You can loathe yourself, but then you just go and find something to take your mind off it.
Yeah.
Which is normally a drug of some sort, or something so powerful that it stops you thinking about the person you became. And there's a lot of kudos to the stuff that you do, and people, they gravitate towards you, so you can actually lose yourself for a while.
Yeah.
In that, it's only when you get time to yourself, and you can keep running from yourself for ages, but you always catch up with yourself.
Yeah.
There's always a time where you're going to catch up with yourself and think, what the hell have I become?
Yeah.
Or who the hell am I? Or I didn't know that was going to happen. Or I didn't know I was going to feel like this. And then I need to go and get high. And with me, when I used to go and get high, everything went.
Yeah.
The car, the watch, everything in the house.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Everything went until I was back on rock bottom. Then I'd end up in prison, and then I'd go again.
I think one of the things that you also said is that getting high was a way to avoid the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really another important insight that you gave.
Well, I didn't realise, to start off with, that's what I was doing, right? Because it's a slow process, becoming an addict. I was addicted to crack. And for the first few years, smoking all the time, but generating the money, it's not till after you start questioning, well, why am I don't want to be doing this.
Yeah.
But I am. And you start challenging yourself and thinking, right, when I get money, when I do this and get money, I'm not going to get high. And then you start to go and get high. So then the pain you have is the pain where you start questioning, have you got control over yourself? Why am I doing this when I know it's not good for me? Now, for me, I started analysing myself and thinking, wow, obviously there's other stuff going on. But the abuse never came into it,
Yeah.
I never started thinking about that. I'd come up with every other angle why I'd be doing what I was doing.
And probably the support that you have from professionals was not also right in order to come across.
Right. I'm just going to say 2 words here. What helped?
Yeah.
What helped?
Yeah.
Pieces of paper given to you where you fill out forms by people who have done a 2-hour course to let you fill out them forms, who change every week because they've got to be on the landings or stuff like that. Or when I was in prison, it was non-existent, yeah. Until I went to a place called Grendon.
Mm.
And Grendon's a psychotherapeutic prison. And some of the stuff I saw in there made me actually start looking at myself and listening to myself, because I was locked up with people who've done some of the most macabre stuff I'd ever heard in my life. And it then started making me think, right, am I genuinely like these? I think that was the first time in my life I started thinking, I need to start looking at myself.
Mm.
So I need to start questioning why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I was working then with real professionals. But even then, I used to think, are they just picking at your brain to do a paper or to get a book out or something like that? Do you understand? I was always trying to work out the psychotherapist who was trying to work me out.
Yeah, their motivations.
Yeah. And I realised then that I'd become so suspicious as a person. I could never just have a normal conversation with someone. I was always looking for every single angle.
Yeah, but I mean, that's right. That's the reason that we I'm asking for your lived experience here, because I think that professionals sometimes they have their own agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Is not always a problem, but they are trying to make you more obedient in the system, and then you have like such a lack of trust for the system, and so different experience from them. So there is a kind of tension here.
Yeah, right. The system, well, I'll try and break it down. The system, you have the prison officers, then you have people who come to try and do CBT things and stuff like that. That for me was farcical. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
That was farcical, and I used to do it every time. You go in and they give you this form with all these monkeys on a tree and say, "What monkey do you think you are?" One of them's happy with his thumbs up, one of them's crying in the corner, and stuff like that. And I'd think, I'm not even going to do this. But when I got to Grendon, I would do many different sorts of groups, and for a while I was fairly quiet, and what I used to do was listen to everyone in the group and listen to what they were saying to the psychotherapist, and I'd clock what triggered the psychotherapist when he'd come into the conversation, and I think, okay, that's what you like to hear.
Yeah.
So I'd learn about that psychotherapist. So
that was also performative in some ways in order to make your way out.
Yeah, of course, because I was only doing it to get out. Do you know what I mean? I was only doing it because I wanted my parole. But like you said, each one of them has a different ego. Each sort of person you sit down has a different ego, and you start to learn to manipulate their ego.
Yeah.
They're after everything out of you, but at the same time, you're working them too. You know, this isn't for everybody. It's just how I used to think. And I got out fairly quick from there. And this will blow you away, what I'm going to say now. I hadn't smoked a drug for 4 years, something like that. And I got out from there and I went to an open prison and I got a home leave. And the day I got my home leave, I was sucking on a crack pipe. Because I thought I'd achieved what I needed to achieve.
Yeah.
And because I'd achieved something,
I need...
I'm now got to put myself back to square one.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I was out then for 17 years. I was.
Oh, wow.
17
long
years.
time.
Yeah. But it was probably the hardest 17 years of my life.
But, you know, there is research who shows that self-destructive pleasure is related with those experience of achieving something if you have been in a lot of pain before.
Mm-hmm.
So there is research which explains that kind of circle by showing that people that they didn't have that kind of pain, they haven't been also so self-destructive also in some ways.
Yeah, I can relate to that 100%.
It's like you achieve something and then you kind of giving something back to yourself, and this something back, it's something completely self-destructive.
Yeah, but when you get to self-destructive, what you have, again, you've got to go back up. So you're giving yourself that drive to get back up there. I was never satisfied being there because I didn't know where there was.
Yeah.
It was I set myself a goal.
Yeah.
And when I sort of thought I'd got there, I said it to you earlier, as soon as I took my foot off the gas, I slipped immediately. As soon as I thought I'd achieved what I wanted, and this is with most things that I've ever done. I mean, as a youngster, I was training at the Molyneux with Wolves players at the side of me and stuff like that. I was doing well, but that weren't good enough. I had to find weed and drink.
Yeah.
I was never, ever happy doing what I was doing. I only ever seemed to feel comfortable when I'd sit there knowing that I was effing everything up for myself.
Yeah.
It seemed to be comfortable. This is where I am. This is what I deserve. Do you know what I mean?
The comfort zone.
And it's sad, really, now I look back on it, you know, but it shaped who I've become today. Do you know what I mean? I've been through quite a lot, I have. And now I sit here today, I recognise so much of what I went through. And a lot of it is through self-exploration, that is. I'll be quite frank with you. The professional help that I received throughout the prison system wasn't the best. Yeah. I've received help out here from Suit, who I now volunteer for, and I met a therapist who just sat me down and just let me talk. Never really talked to me. And I never shut up every time I went in there. And I've never felt this need to shoot myself back in the foot.
Great. I was ready to ask you now that a lot of people they're saying that, self-destruction didn't stop after their release from prison, and you kind of described that back and forth for you. And I want you to like tell me the ways you already mentioned that, but the ways that Sweet help you actually to change, because I think it's very important. We have many professionals trying to help, but there is something here which is related with the lived experience that people have there that help you to kind of change.
Yeah, I walked into Suit. I was on a very serious charge. Someone had been stabbed a couple of times. I'd been hurt really bad, and I was looking at a long time in prison. And this happened just at the start of COVID. And I thought to myself, I generally thought I was getting 10 years or more. I thought, do you know what? I'm not going to go into prison as an addict. I'm not going to, because if I go in as an addict, as soon as I get released, just like every other time, I'm going to come out as an addict. And I thought, I need some help. I've got to, for the first time ever, say I can't do this anymore. And I went to see my doctor, who sent me to Penn Hospital, which is for people with mental problems and stuff like that. And they referred me to a place called Recovery Near You and Suit. Recovery Near You is the clinical side of things. Nah, not for me. I've got too much to say. And Suit just let me express myself. They let me be me. There was no judgment. They're all lived experience. They're a LERO, lived experience recovery organisation. And I met people who, they just knew.
Yeah.
I could just look at them and they knew. And I was ready. This is what I've got to explain this. For me to get where I've got, I had to be ready.
Yeah.
Then the people I was around had to be ready. The therapy that I was going to have had to be the right. The stars had to align. And luckily for me, they did. And the funny thing is, well, it's not funny even. I was asked to write about what I'd been through, and I just thought, F off. No, that's for idiots. But I did. I started doing it, and I found it really worked for me. And I was just telling you in the car, just last night, I found something I wrote 2 years ago, and it's on my phone now, and I just read it a little bit, and it was talking about this is the addict that I was when I kind of just walked into Suit. I just kind of finished, when I was accessing help, because you have to be there clean for 6 months before you can become a volunteer. And they gave me the chance just to express myself and be myself, and say to me, go out there and do what you do. And I used to do SMART groups, which is self-management and recovery training. And I used to think they were a joke to start off with, but then I started realising that without them I was struggling, and I started realising that I needed help on a daily basis. Yeah. It couldn't be fortnightly or weekly. I had to go in on a daily basis and feed myself with this energy, and to keep away from everything and everybody that I'd ever encountered before. Yeah. There was no half measures here. I had to just completely cut it off and say, right, he's gone, he's. Yeah. And I'm still there now. I'm still doing the same thing now that I was then. I'm smiling now because I do a lot more now.
Exactly. It's not that you are still there only.
Yeah, I do a lot more, but this is all with the help and guidance. Christiane Jenkins kind of guided me forward. She showed me the way, and I've run with that baton since. Marcus has just said to me, like, just be a voice piece. Just be yourself. And that acceptance there has meant everything to me. I carry them with me. I carry them with me in my heart, because that acceptance. And don't get me wrong, life's been hard. I've had people there that haven't got on with me and stuff like that. But you know what? That's called life. Yeah. Where I would have took it the wrong way before, That's just called life, you know. And I now, you know, I met you at Warwick University, just at a thing called a symposium. I didn't even know what a symposium was. Right. And off the back of that, I've been invited to BBC Radio and other radio stations. And I talk, and I do a lot of my poetry.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the major thing is when I read, I know I'm helping people. I know that I'm relating to people because they come up to me sometimes months later and say, wow, what you said made me think this or do this. And I know I'm helping people. And for all my life, I manipulated and used people for my own gain. Now, all I've done is turn that 180 degrees and I get into their heads just the same, but this time to show them that they can do something good with their lives. And off the back of that, I get it. Do you understand? I go home and I think, I've done all right today. I wake up in the morning and think I've done all right today. And do you know what? I haven't hurt anyone along the way. And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think it's great. And you're doing great. And I think that it really stands out in your story, the support that you get from Sweet. And it's actually showing why it's so important to centralize lived experience in relation to addiction, in relation to mental health problems, in relation to structural problems, systemic problems that people have within the society. And I think it's very, very, very important that you are yourself the paradigm of what you are talking about.
Right, yeah.
And that's exactly the difference. If you feel that, you know, a professional had like a very easy life and then you are really not easy to compare or to connect, it's not also easy to accept counseling for people that you cannot really relate with. So I think all these are very important.
Yeah, I think that's so important because I think the part of my journey that I'm on now is I've been to many places now and listened to very intellectual, clever people like yourself. But what I'm listening to, I'm thinking, you've got it all, but you haven't quite got it. All right, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to anybody.
Yeah, no.
And the lived experience I have, and you've heard me say this before, but I love saying it. I've got 40 years worth of lived experience. To be a doctor in this country, you only need 7 years. So what does that make me? I'm far past being a professor of the street and of the life that I've had. So I know these people. I know the people that we're dealing with. And in conjunction with me, yourself, and people like yourself, we can move heaven and earth to help people and to cross boundaries and cross borders and start realising that lived experience is key. When you tap into somebody who's been there, gone through it, and it is doing well, that pot of knowledge is second to none. I can go to university tomorrow and I can do a 3-year course and have a degree. But a person having a degree or a doctorate is not going to have my 40 years worth of experience. That doesn't make me better than them. It just means let's do it together. Let's
or
work.
Them better than you.
Yeah, no, well, not for a second do I. I never feel intimidated when I go into these places. As you've seen yourself, I've always got something to say. And it's never to put anyone down either.
Yeah, of course.
I never put people down. I'm just saying, come on, use me, use my knowledge. Why is it that I struggle to get into prisons? I do, to help people. I'm allowed in twice. It goes down great, and then I'm told, no, I can't. And I'm going through a process at the moment, which is a really long-winded process to start that going. There's a lot of professionals who look down their nose at people with lived experience, right? And I don't know whether it's because they fear that they might be pushed aside, which I think is ridiculous, because let's work together.
Yeah.
We can do this together.
It's maybe a power game. Yeah,
do you know what
right.
I mean? Yeah. I don't think there is it's a social game as well.
It is.
Because the social structure, most of the people that have the degrees and whatnot come from a different economic background.
It's a social class.
Yeah. So there's all of that. I go in with my sweatshirt on and I sit down and I talk to these people on a level, and I normally find that they engage.
Yeah.
I normally find that they engage.
Great. I think part of this conversation was in order to honor and centralize lived experience in relation to addiction, to self-destruction, and to show that that kind of centralizing can shift the narrative away from pathologization or from dehumanization. So we can kind of understanding more the meaning out of it, and that acceptance is so important.
Yeah, well, if you've got all your paperwork and that, and you're working with someone, I totally understand. You see all the facts, and you can see stuff, but there's something not quite there when you haven't lived it. And I'm not saying that you don't know what you're doing, but what I'm saying is, do you understand the person? When you're writing up your paperwork on them at the end of it, do you actually understand the background and truly empathise with what they've been through? And I'm not making an excuse for anybody here. I'm just saying, the more knowledge you have, the more power you have. Now, the knowledge that people with lived experience can give you is the fact that they've got lived experience.
Yeah, it's exactly that part, the actual experience, and not just the reading about things or like a kind of abstract knowledge.
There can be an almost... Right. I've dealt with people who are almost cold.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they're reading off a script when they talk to you. And when you've done it as many times as I have, you start hearing the same thing over and over again, and you just think, you're not listening to me, are you?
Yeah.
You're not actually hearing what I'm saying here. You're just coming up with your conclusion. You're writing it down. Freud thought this, or so-and-so thought this, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, for me, whenever I sit down and talk to someone, if they start writing a lot, it worries me a bit. It worries me a bit. Do you know? I want them to be looking in my eyes and hear what I'm saying. And if they're good at what they're doing, then normally I think to myself, they'll get it anyway.
Yeah.
They can follow it up at the end.
Yeah.
They've only got an hour with you. They only give you 50 minutes. If they can't remember what you said in 50 minutes, that's slightly worried in my opinion. But that's just my thoughts.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. And I think it actually shows a lot of the things that I want to stress out. That's why we're having this conversation, to show the kind of difference between lived experience and then the way that a role can kind of constrain you around it, and then you need to perform within a role, and then you're not actually helping, but you're just offering a kind of coercive care, in the way that I call it, in order to tick the box.
Yeah, well, you've heard me talk many a time about tick boxing exercises and stuff like that. And the shame of all of this is, so many of the people that do it don't realise they're doing it.
Yeah.
Because they've lived their life, and I'm not condemning them for having a life where they've been able to go to university and get educated and that. But where's their, when I say lived experience, I don't mean of drugs. I mean, where's their real life lived experience?
Yeah. Can be
Have
whatever.
they ever had to wonder where the food's coming from on the table or stuff like that? You know, all of these sorts of things, they make a rounded individual. They make a rounded human being that then can make educated decisions on people of where they're coming from. If you've done reasonably well all your life, it's very, very hard. And you've only got to look at a lot of politicians to realise this. Their total understanding of people is not very good.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They say they stand for you, but they don't even know who they're standing for.
Yeah. Completely. Oh, thank you so much, Warren. That was great. Before I close, I will just briefly to say that you can find a link to the full report, which explores self-destruction in prison, here under this podcast, and that this report shows that what a lot of things that Warren just said about coercive care, about the fact that self-harm in prison is not just about pain, it's about survival, and how vulnerability in many cases it's an outcome, it's a problem which is a systemic problem, and then people get punished individually for a problem which is actually a society's problem. Now, as Warren said, in many cases, care is coming from people with lived experience, and that was the experience of Warren. That was also my experience when I did this research, that a lot of the support came from people that they have been already marginalized, they have been already fail in some ways, and then they managed to build solidarity and show some kind of support and care. This research challenged the idea that self-destruction is irrational, and instead I'm asking, what is the meaning behind those acts in places that you don't have anything in control? The answer to that question can make space for the possibility that self-destructive behavior can carry meaning, whether it's as relief, self-soothing, expression of agency, or temporary control. This does not mean that we are endorsing harm, but that support needs to be engaged through radical care, through a kind of acceptance that Warren talked about in this talk. Warren, you want to say something before we close?
I'm just thinking about everything I said, because I had not a clue what I was going to say, and I just want to thank you really for bringing me on this journey, because you've helped me so much. You've helped me so much by just letting me talk openly as in all the times that I've met you. And I seem to be getting something from this, and it seems to be, I think you've redirected my life trajectory, to be quite frank with you. So I just want to thank you.
Wow, Warren, thank you so much. That sounds amazing. Thank you so much. You have been also really, really helpful throughout this research and this like kind of journey for me to understand and unpack self-destruction and give also something back to the community. That was also very, very important for me. And I think through SWEET we managed to do that, and it's amazing.
There is one thing I want to say. You're not going to believe I'm going to get this in. I just want to say, part of me becoming who I am is a thing called recovery, and I'm in recovery. I'm always going to be battling recovery. And on September the 13th in Wolverhampton, we have a thing called the Recovery Walk. And this is open to anybody in the country to come and celebrate recovery. And there will probably be 5,000 to 10,000 people there. I just thought I'd get that in.
Great. That's great. Thank you so much. So, yes, is there for the
13th of
September, the Recovery Walk in Wolverhampton?
Wolverhampton, West Park, Wolverhampton.
Great.
Starting around 10 o'clock.
Thanks so much.
No
Thanks,
problem.
Warren.
Okay.
Thank you.